Mr. Hutchinson goes to Washington. Will Washington lean his way? The state treasury, big smiles for January, but concern for the coming fiscal year. The State Ethics Commission and the state treasurer over and done. And after Huckabee, after Iowa, where's Arkansas? Arkansas Week next.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.
This is Arkansas Week.
Hello again, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us for Arkansas Week. A great deal of news at the administrative, the policy, and the political level this week. So we'll get started. Michael Hiblin joins us from KUAR Public Radio in Central Arkansas. Steve Bronner, an independent journalist, and our friend Lance Turner, reporter, columnist for Arkansas Business, and thanks to everybody for coming in. We'll begin, Michael, with the Department of Human Services, the biggest agency in state government. Mr. Hutchinson, Governor Hutchinson, went to Washington this past week, met with the Secretary of Health and Human Services about Arkansas Works. How much did he come back with, or does he think he can eventually get?
Well, he hasn't given a whole lot of specifics yet. We'll learn at legislative task force hearing in a couple of weeks. But so far he came back saying this was a good start. Said that pretty much the meeting, he was there with a couple of legislative leaders as well, went well. Said the four main elements that he wants to make to change what is currently known as the private option will become Arkansas Works. He said those remain intact, incentivizing work, requiring people who make on the higher end of that 138% of the poverty line to pay 2% and requiring more employer-based coverage. Said most of those seem to remain intact, so he and the legislative leaders said they felt good about it, said that the federal government and Burwell is willing to work as much as possible within the parameters of what they can do. As I said, we'll have more information at this hearing February 17th. That's when he'll share more details and we'll really get some questioning about what was discussed.
Would it be fair to summarize it at this point as saying the feds didn't say yes, but they didn't say no either?
That's about what it sounds like at this point. Don't know whether or not it's going to be approved, and it may very well depend on what is finalized in this. The legislature obviously is going to have to approve what the governor is proposing, and that's going to be at a special session in early April.
You know, the governor wants to show that he's trying to do as much as he can to make this program more palatable to Republicans and to improve, you know, where he thinks the program needs to be improved. But the federal government also, you know, has great incentive to keep Arkansas sort of in line with the program. And Arkansas is one of the success stories across the country from their point of view and how the private option has worked. And Arkansas, I think, is second only to Kentucky. I think those numbers were out this week, second only to Kentucky in terms of the number of people we've been able to get on the insured rolls. And so, you know, the governor has his incentives and the federal government has their incentives in terms of trying to reach some kind of compromise on some of the changes that they would like to implement.
Yeah, Steve.
Not just on the fact that the private option has been successful in enrolling people, but also because it's been successful politically. They need Arkansas, because Arkansas was one of the first red states, if not the first red state, that embraced Medicaid expansion through the private option. So after Arkansas, other states followed that probably would not have said yes. And so, you know, they want to work with Arkansas. At the same time, you know, Governor Hutchinson went to Washington knowing what the feds would say no to. He was well aware that some of the punitive measures that he would like to have included were not going to get an okay, and those were pretty much dropped.
He would not call them punitive, but go ahead. I mean,
And he actually did use that word.
did it really? I missed
Yesterday
that.
in a press conference that the things that would have been more punitive. He knew that wasn't going to happen, and he knows that this is part of Obamacare, and there are things that they want to get done at the federal government level that they're going to make us do, but. At the same time, I think that they're going to work with Arkansas, and we'll come back with something that's pretty close to what he's proposed.
And the fact that we had 7,700 more people get on the private option in January. So you've got a good chunk of people now who are getting insurance and are happy to have coverage. So the governor wants to find a way. He couldn't go along with the people who wanted to end it, has to find a way to make this work, but under now what he wants the changes to be.
Well, but I note too, and credit where it's due, our friend and colleague, sometime colleague Dave Ramsey on the Arkansas Times was doing an interview with Senator Hendren this past week, and reported Senator Hendren a very central player, key player in this thing. Under the best of circumstances, this is going to be tight.
You mean the vote?
Yeah, the vote in the General Assembly.
Well, certainly. It requires a 75% majority to pass because it's spending state government money. And in 2013, when it was created, it barely passed. And in 2014, it barely passed again. And the only reason that it passed easily in 2015 was because Governor Hutchinson made a deal with legislators that we'll do something different at the end of 2016. And so they all agreed to do it. But, it has been razor-thin margins ever since it was created, and every election cycle, you do better in the Republican Party primaries by saying you're against it than saying you're for it. And at some point, some of those candidates tend to change their mind once they get down to Little Rock and hear the numbers. But eventually, it's going to still be a tight vote, and this will be an interesting special session for sure, and fiscal session.
Yeah, and even now we have Republican primaries for the General Assembly in which it would appear that the private option, Arkansas Works, is the dominant issue. It's
an issue. I mean, when you have to have 75% of the vote, and you've had exactly 75% of the vote, or maybe one vote more, and you have several races that are bending on this issue, yeah, it's a big deal. And I've been surveying Northwest Arkansas candidates for a project. And those who say they're for it, well, those who say, no one comes out and says, I am for the private option. Some of them will kind of say, will not really answer the question. Well, they're the ones who are mostly for it. But a number of them say, I'm against it. And so it's always going to be a tight sell.
How much more difficult does it make for the Hutchinson administration that we are in the midst of a presidential nominating cycle in which all the major GOP candidates claim to, at one point or one level or another, absolutely despise Obamacare, from Mr. Cruz, who vows to, quote, repeal every word of it, to Mr. Rubio, who says, well, I don't like it either, so we're going to replace it with what? It's not exactly certain, and who knows, frankly, what Mr. Trump will say from one day to the next. It seems to vary, except he hates it as well. How much more difficult does that make the job of building support for this Arkansas Works?
Well, the governor has had to skirt this line because he also says he opposes Obamacare, and yet he embraces the private option, which uses Obamacare dollars. And there are some in the media who would say that this is being hypocritical. But he's managed to say the entire time, look, this is the hand we were dealt with. I wouldn't have voted for it, but this is what we've got to do in order to make the money work. So it's always a challenge, but as long as you can he's managed to walk that line pretty well. And he's also been able to say that we're going to wait, let's survive until the next administration. If it's a Republican, then we can maybe do some more of the things that he wants to do, such as the more punitive measures, make it tougher. At that point, if he can keep buying time, which is what he's been doing, that's really been that's what his ultimate goal is to buy enough time, make it work, and continue to make it more of an Arkansas-based program.
I'm not sure, and I've said repeatedly, I'm not sure who has the toughest job in government, whether it's the governor or the director of DHS. I'm inclined to think the latter. But at any rate, we're about to get a new one.
Yeah, the governor announced on Wednesday that he's hired a woman named Cindy Gillespie. She's a former healthcare aide to or advisor to Mitt Romney, was an architect to the plan that he implemented in Massachusetts, which was largely what the model for the the Affordable Care Act, was based on. She knows a lot about it, and the governor seems very confident. This was the result of a national search, and the governor said in a statement that he's confident Cindy Gillespie has the breadth of experience, management capabilities, and the right ideas to lead Arkansas's largest agency, and that she has nationally recognized expertise when it comes to the reform of Medicaid. She hasn't made herself available for interviews yet, but it will be interesting to see her when she does come in and weighs in on this. She's to become the head of DHS on March 1st, and big salary jump. The current head, John Seelig, makes about $162,000. The governor wants to pay Ms. Gillespie $280,000, and that'll have to be approved by the legislature. Interesting, John Seelig has been in that post for 11 years, was appointed by Governor Mike Huckabee, was kept on during Governor Mike Beebe's term, and he was really key in setting up the private option, said he now wants to return to private sector. So he's been in there a long time, and will be interesting to see now what she brings to the table.
Well, we'll bring to the table some new numbers. We got the January, Lance, we got the January revenue report, which was certainly encouraging. And even as we taped the broadcast on Friday morning, Washington came up with some fairly encouraging numbers too.
That's right, yeah.
We needed some after oil prices
yeah,
driving everybody crazy.
Oil prices are insane and continue to be so, and I think some predict a bit of a relief toward the end of the year, but we'll wait and see on that. But yeah, January general revenue here in Arkansas at $628 million, up $12 million from the same time last year. Also a record for January collections. And it looks like some of this increase is coming in some key areas. Retail sales and use tax seem to be very strong this time, and so that was an indicator to John Shelnut and some of the other economists in state government that the economy is doing very well. People had been spending very well. This is sort of a trailing indicator, because this is for kind of the November-December period in terms of that retail spending, and so going into the holidays. So there appears to have been some strong holiday spending that would bode well for going forward as gas prices continue to fall. People theoretically have more money in their pockets and can spend that money. So that was a good sign. And then, of course, on the national scene this morning, the U.S. adding 151,000 jobs in January rather, and the jobless rate falling 0.1 of a percentage point to 4.9%. And the national jobless rate kind of is, or the report rather, is a bit of a mixed bag. Probably the highlight is the wage increases that we've seen, more than 2% hike in average wages, which is good and something we've been waiting to see a long time. Wage growth has been one of the problems in the economy of late, and maybe we're finally seeing some movement as more hiring takes place, and maybe some people's salaries are starting to increase. And so still a lot of worries out there, mainly owing to the global economy, problems in China, problems in Europe that linger, and of course we're a global economy, and so that affects us as well. But I think while there's the thought from some analysts that there's a chance that the U.S. could fall into recession at some point, that chance remains very small, and I think by and large people are relatively optimistic, the daily swings in the stock market notwithstanding.
It'd be nice to see it get near 18 again, I suppose, if you're looking at your SEP or your IRA.
That's right. Yeah, your 401k. If you're in that retirement zone, if you're inching closer there, it seems like that you would definitely love for those numbers to be stronger.
Well, even with an encouraging January report, much of the December retail was included in the January numbers. The Hutchinson administration, with not one but two budgets about to be proposed, needs every dime.
It does. The governor has proposed increasing money on highways, and we'll have a special session about that after the special session on health care, followed by the fiscal session. So, and for that to work, I mean, his money depends on state government having a surplus, and the only way that state government can have a surplus is if more money is coming in. Unless there's a major cut in government, that's going to be tough because we're spending more on health care and other things. So his budget depends on more revenues, so I'm sure that this is good news for him and his administration.
As well as Arkansas Works.
Yes.
Or at least the budget he'd prefer, anyway.
Yeah, he spoke to economic developers yesterday and said that all three are tied together. The health care will determine the fiscal session and how we budget things, and then the highway plan depends on having enough money from everything else to pay for fixing our roads.
On to another matter, and that is the Arkansas State Treasurer, Steve, has been embroiled in one little controversy or another practically since taking office. Is there some resolution now?
Well, he agreed to pay a $400 fine.
Mr. Milligan.
Right, Treasurer Milligan, for admitting to, I think, four violations that were relatively minor, having to do mostly with paperwork type things on finance reports. So this was a result of a ethics suit or ethics complaint by blogger Matt Campbell, and looks like that maybe this will be it, and we can talk about something else.
Yeah, there were, several allegations made by Mr. Campbell that the Ethics Commission did not find warranted being involved in this, and that included allegations of hiring spouses of former lawmakers, using employees in the Saline County Circuit Clerk's office to do campaign work and other things. Only a $400 fine. Campbell wasn't happy with that. He thought he should have been. Milligan should have had a bigger fine with this. And of course, Milligan also has been fighting a lawsuit filed by his former outreach manager. So yes, it's been a continuous battle for him since coming into office, the complaints.
This past Monday night at approximately, I suppose, 10 p.m. Central Time, the former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee, said, "I've had enough of the battle, and I'm leaving."
Yeah, only got 2% of the vote in Iowa, and said he was suspending his campaign. He had remained hopeful. I don't know if he really believed he still had a chance or if it was just campaign talk, but Sunday he was quoted saying, "We plan to surprise, shock, and mystify people," and that miracle didn't come out, and so yes, he suspended his campaign. Obviously, Senator Ted Cruz won in Iowa. Trump came in second, and Marco Rubio came in third. And so now there's a lot of questions about who's going to get the support that Huckabee had in Arkansas. He pretty much had the full congressional delegation, constitutional officers, a lot of state lawmakers who are backing Huckabee, and now there's the big fight over who's going to get their endorsements. So far, Rubio has gotten backing from Lieutenant Governor Tim Griffin and Congressman Rick Crawford and Steve Womack. The governor and others saying they're looking, and we can expect some endorsements.
It seemed as though they were almost poised to make that endorsement. Steve?
Well, I mean, in 2008 it was there for Huckabee, and in 2016 it just wasn't. I mean, his campaign never caught fire. He started out as a major player. He was among that top 10 that was well on, and not on the edge of those debate stages. He was somewhere closer to the middle at first, and never caught fire. The evangelical Christian vote that he counted on went to Cruz and Trump and Rubio, and it just never happened for him. And I think everybody saw that coming. And in fact, his own campaign sent signals quite some time ago that if he didn't really do well in Iowa, it was not going to look good, and he didn't do well in Iowa.
And so here we are stuck with a March 1st primary in Arkansas. We had moved that primary in part, I think, as a favor to help Mike Huckabee hopefully, join this raft of states in the so-called SEC primary that take place here in the South, and hopefully be more of an impact in the election, and then also sort of package those southern states where it was theorized that Huckabee may perform well in, and so. There you go.
Yeah, of course we got New Hampshire Tuesday night, but do we have a sense of where Arkansas, the endorsements thus far post Huckabee, shall we style it, seem to go to Mr. Rubio. You have a sense of where the Arkansas Republican body politic is now, those endorsements notwithstanding?
Well, there's two types. There's the people who are committed Republicans, and they've already spoken in an earlier, delegate poll where they overwhelmingly went with Cruz. But then you have the voters in the Republican primary who aren't necessarily Republicans, and it's they still have a chance to make their voices heard. I was at the Donald Trump rally. They announced a crowd of 11,500. There was no way there was that many people there, but there was a lot. There was a lot more for Donald Trump than there would be for anybody else, and. He had some mechanical problems. He was an hour and a half late, and nobody left. And nobody seemed that anxious, actually. I didn't hear a lot of grumbling. It just seemed like everybody was just waiting. So that says to me that those were actually Trump voters. They didn't come for a show. If they were coming for a show and they had to wait at Barton Coliseum for an hour and a half, they would have left. They didn't. They stayed, and when he came, they were enthusiastic. So he does have a big following, and we'll have to just wait and see how it comes. So, committed Republicans are more for Cruz. You do have a band of establishment-type Republicans who are for Rubio, who think that he is the best candidate for the Republican Party. And then you've got the masses, and they have yet to speak or even to really say much about where they're polling.
Well, it's fair to assume that Mr. Cruz will swing by at least once before March 1, and probably Mr. Rubio as well.
Mm-hmm. We'll probably get some visits here in the coming weeks. One thing that struck me about the Trump rally, though, is that typically when you have presidential candidates come pay a visit, you have some local politicians there, and there was no one who came on stage, no introduction from an Arkansas politician. I know there was.
He's the outsider, though.
Yeah, and but there was talk that he was going to be meeting with Governor Hutchinson, but that was canceled because of him running late. His plane having mechanical problems, having to make a stop in Nashville, and I don't know if they did speak by phone or anything, but that was just one issue. But the Trump rally, it was interesting to watch. I wasn't there. I watched it online, but he mostly stuck to the same rhetoric we've been hearing about, said that the election was stolen in Iowa and attributed it to dirty tricks, and also took a shot at Hillary Clinton, saying the Clintons have left, but even if they were here, they wouldn't have the kind of turnout that he had at Barton Coliseum.
Well, on the Democratic side, we've got, of course, New Hampshire. They've had some spirited debates, Mr. Sanders, Mrs. Clinton, over the last 10 days, 2 weeks.
I think the gloves are off in that race as we head into New Hampshire, and I think that owes, of course, to the razor-thin margin in Iowa. And I know the newspaper in Iowa is really urging a review of that whole caucus process. Yeah. I think there's been allegations on all sides of that maybe there were some things that happened that weren't between the ditches, that weren't entirely above board. But yeah, you're seeing Hillary Clinton, really trying to define herself versus Bernie Sanders, and really try to create some energy as well. I mean, he seems to have the youthful energy and the activity and a lot of fundraising happening around him, and she continues to be sort of dogged by a lot of just questions about where her money comes from, and of course the emails are still out there, and so I think it's not a surprise to see her sort of ratcheting up the energy and the aggressiveness in terms of trying to counter his gains.
Well, she is the odds-on favorite to finish a very distant second Tuesday night in New Hampshire. Actually looking to the west and the south.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is looking ahead to other states. She's talking about Flint, Michigan, and working to appeal to the African American community there. But for New Hampshire, we do have a group that's traveling up there. Many are already up there, of about 87 prominent Arkansans. And it's kind of a throwback to 92 when you had the Arkansas Travelers, as they called, head up to New Hampshire to make the case. You've got former Senator David Pryor, his son, the other former Senator Mark Pryor, former Pulaski County Judge Buddy Valines, former North Little Rock Mayor Pat Hayes, all up in New Hampshire working to make the case for Hillary.
So the question is, is everything old new again? Can it be made new again? I guess. Right? Well, they're trying. Thanks, guys, for coming in. As always, thanks to you for watching. See you next week.
Arkansas Week is made possible in part by the Arkansas Times, keeping you informed by covering people, events, and politics in Arkansas. By FM 89, KUAR in Little Rock, with in-depth news reporting, analysis, and discussion each weekday.